All right, folks, we have a great new film coming out that I want to talk to everybody about. I don't know intricate details, but that's why I went right to the expert, got writer and producer on with us now, Rick Delano. He's going to tell you about it. It's called The Principle, and we can hear a little bit more about that. Rick, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on.
All right, it's great, and I want to just jump right to it. Give us a little heads up on, what the film is about, what you're trying to accomplish, and what people will take away from it.
Okay, the film is about the single fundamental idea that brings the modern world into existence. It's called the Copernican Principle, and it basically tells us that we are nothing special, that the Earth is not in any special location in the universe, and this is the fundamental idea that underlies every bit of the cosmology that we have been taught since we were children. The Big Bang, and we're an insignificant rock orbiting an insignificant sun on some far-off galaxy, and this is the fundamental assumption that we are taught from birth. Now, what's interesting is when you think about it, there are really two stories that shape Western civilization. And the first one is the story we read in Genesis. And that story puts us right smack dab in the center of everything. Because, when you read Genesis 1:1, God thought it was important to tell us that in the beginning He created the heavens and the earth.
Right.
And that puts us right smack dab in the middle of everything. And that was exactly what every Christian in the world believed unquestionably, because it's clearly what the Bible teaches, right up until the Copernican Revolution. And the Copernican Revolution introduced this radical idea that we weren't at the center. And all of modern science since has basically boiled down to a series of further demotions. We went from being the center to being, the third planet. Then we found out that our solar system was part of a much larger galaxy, and then we found out that there are billions of galaxies, and we just kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And the film is about two things, basically. First of all, how did we change our view of reality so drastically? 400 years ago, if I told you the Earth was the center of the universe, if I told you the Earth wasn't the center of the universe, you would think I was mentally ill. Today, if I tell you that it is, you will think that I'm mentally ill. How did that happen? How did that complete inversion of worldview occur? It's the most fascinating detective story in the history of science. But what really makes this film controversial and why it's an absolute must-see is that over the past 10 years, our scientists have trained their most sensitive collectors on the very furthest reaches of the cosmos. We are the very first generation to see out as far as it is possible to see. If there's anything further out than we've seen, we'll never see it, because the light won't have time to reach us. So we are the first generation to have seen it all, and I had to tell you, what they're seeing is so stunning that they've been sitting on it for 10 years. And they've set up now 3 different missions because they couldn't believe their eyes. And what they are seeing is that the very largest structures in this incomprehensibly vast cosmos are strangely aligned with our little local neighborhood here. And this is so completely contrary to any of the predictions of the Big Bang that it's kind of been swept under the carpet for a decade or so. And we decided that it was time to bring this information out, and we interviewed some of the top cosmologists in the world, and we also interviewed some of the leading dissidents and mavericks, including people who have always held to the ancient biblical cosmology that holds the Earth as the center of the universe. And boy, oh boy, did we ever stir up some controversy. And the film is now out in theaters. We just had a tremendous opening weekend in Chicago. We're going to be expanding slowly but surely into more cities and theaters. And the interest in this film is just astounding. It's taking off all over the world.
Well, it's a fantastic concept, and I really love the cosmology angle, something that I have been transformed by, and that was the revelation of how special Earth really is. And one of the things that, as a scientist by trade, and then becoming, just wrangled by the collar by our Lord of Bible-believing Christian, that how do I reconcile the two? And one of the things for me was to sit down and look at just how perfect God has everything for the earth to promote life. So every little thing, if we adjust any little thing, we don't exist. So to
That's
apply,
so true.
yeah, I mean, we have just the right amount of oxygen, the right amount of carbon dioxide. The moon is just at the right distance. We're the right distance from the sun. We're not too far. We're not too close. Every little piece of all the little things, too much gravity, too little gravity. Every little thing you analyze in physics and chemistry is so perfectly analyzed. So when we go to now, we look at cosmology and we start to find confirmation of what God's told us. I not only find that so reassuring, I find that actually exciting.
It's extremely exciting, and I have a message for people of faith up on our website at theprinciplemovie.com that raises that exact point. In my view, this is just my opinion, but it is my view that we have been in decline. The Christian faith has been in decline in the West for centuries. It's been slow, but it's gathering speed. Now, we're losing significant portions of our young people because they go off to educational institutions, higher learning institutions, and they confront this atheist argument. And they're unprepared intellectually to withstand it, and it's taking their faith from them. So this film is hugely important because it really does show that in important ways, this conversation is not over. This question of our place in the cosmos has been at the center of the last two great transformations of human civilization. The Copernican Revolution literally ended the medieval world and brought the Enlightenment world into existence. Then that problem came back again, and relativity was introduced. So we've had the two greatest scientific revolutions in Western history directly around this question, what is our place in the cosmos? And with these new observations, this conversation is coming back again. As a matter of fact, one of the atheists in the film, virulent anti-Christian, by the name of Lawrence Krauss, he actually asks the question, is this Copernicus coming back to haunt us? That's how big this is.
Well, I think what's important here is you have on your site and some different things that talk about Carl Sagan. Of course, he gets a lot of credit for moving that ball down the field a lot, in my opinion. And we really start to see now, if we have data, and we start to unearth the actual data of what is the construct of the universe as we know it. And you present this in the film and can show people, look, if you don't believe this, start to dig a little bit on your own. It's not like they have to just take their word on things. And that's where I think the difference lies with a great project like this compared to what I think, sadly, the students get in the classroom, right? You know this, and you know this because I tell you that, and they never dig deeper.
Oh, I couldn't possibly agree more. Look, who gets to tell the creation story gets to define the civilization.
Right.
We used to tell the creation story, and they've been telling the creation story. And look, science can only take us so far. Science can tell us what photons are hitting what collectors, and they can put it on an XYZ axis, but science can't tell us what it means.
Right.
Only our worldview can tell us what it means. And if we keep seeing evidence in our telescopes that Earth is in a very special position in the cosmos, if our fundamental worldview rules that out in advance, it's going to get buried. It's going to get ignored. It's going to get explained away. If, however, you see this evidence from a Christian standpoint, it's extremely exciting. It's almost like we're finally in a position to stop playing defense here and re-engage this culture in a conversation about what everybody is sure the Bible was wrong about, and most illiterate Christians couldn't be possibly serious. Well, we are. And it's not us saying it, it's the scientists themselves, and that's why the film has generated so much controversy.
The one thing that came out of the Copernican Revolution is, by us not being the center of the universe, it takes away, God's relationship. We're nothing special, and you point that out a little bit here. How is that message sort of being upended in the scientific community? I mean, you talk about some of the experts in your film just briefly, but go ahead and expound on that a little bit more about, there's sort of kind of a shock factor, I think, for a scientist when you look at something thinking that you know what to expect, and then you find something like this where you're like, whoa, wait a minute, that's not at all what I expect. How has that come across in the film, and what are you hearing now that the film is starting to roll out a little bit?
Well, I can tell you that the words you just said Oh, that's not at all what we did. That's literally in the film from Max Tegmark at MIT, who's a brilliant and wonderful scientist. He's an atheist, but he has completely changed 180 degrees his views concerning our significance in the cosmos. Because, as he says in the film, my gut was telling me this couldn't be right, but my brain has to override my gut, and I now think we're very significant. So even from within an atheist worldview, this evidence is so compelling that it is having a dramatic impact on some of the leading intellects in the materialist and atheist scientific community. What I see here is an opportunity for a bridge to be built between the great intellectual traditions of the Christian religion, which built Western civilization and gave us the scientific method, thank you very much.
Yes.
And this rapidly rising sort of new atheist religion, which is trying to take science and allege that it's capable of answering all of our questions, which it isn't. It cannot. True science is a matchless tool, a tool of matchless power and precision, but it can only tell us about the material aspects of reality. It must rely on higher knowledge domains in order for us humans to be able to take its data and turn it into a worldview that makes sense. And of course, we as Christians, we know that God is the author of two books. One is the book of Scripture, the other is the book of nature. They have the same author, and in the end, they can never conflict. Science is a contingent, ever-changing way of knowing. The Scriptures and the theology of the Christian religion are direct from God, and consequently, we should expect that these two fields are going to bump up against each other from time to time. This time, they're bumping up against each other with evidence in hand that suggests that the Christian view of reality that puts us in the center, because after all, we're the place of the incarnation of the Son of God.
You know, it's so exciting. It's so exciting because one of the things that always just makes me want to pull my hair out whenever I try to watch an apologetic debate an atheist, especially if it's an atheist that has a very strong science background. They always talk about they're looking for a predictable model and observations and insinuating that belief in the Bible or belief in a creation or belief in a designer that started all of this somehow takes that away. And yet here we have cosmology, which should have a predictable model, an observable model, and it's completely wrong. And they're going to do everything they can to probably denounce your film and try to discredit that this this is going to be proof, right? You're going to present all this data, and they're going to trip over themselves.
Listen, this film is very difficult to discredit once you've seen it, because the story that is being told about this film is a complete hoax. And everyone who saw it in Chicago, this weekend in Chicago, people walking in saying, I can't believe all the lies that were told about your film. The film is a very balanced, very serious, very wonderful film of ideas. It is an invitation to both Christians and other people of faith and non-believers to meet on the frontier of this shocking new evidence and begin a dialogue. The last word in the script of the film is, hopefully we can have a more fruitful dialogue this time around.
Yeah.
And that is my hope. But I have to tell you, initial indications are that the other side, which is now the dominant worldview, they're not happy about this film. And to be perfectly frank with you, they have reason not to be. They don't want this information to be widely known and debated by us, because it really does come down to the fundamental question, what is our place in the cosmos? Which of those two creation stories more accurately reflects what we're seeing?
You know, it's funny you say that too, because I always, especially coming from the scientific background, I did research for a while and all that. People have to realize, I talk to a lot of my Christian brethren about this and say, you have to realize they're vested not just financially as their career, because this is their job, and they're scared to death they'll lose grant money or not have a job or not know where to go. But it's also the crisis of faith, because now there's a creator. There is someone accountable. There's a designer. You're now observing. You don't get to play in the realm of science fiction, as I've said, and it doesn't matter if Rick agrees with me or not. As Stephen Hawking and many of the others do, they play in a realm of science fiction without science that can even be observed and tested anymore, and we've allowed it to happen unchecked.
That is such a powerful point, and it's covered in an unforgettable way in this film by one of the greatest, perhaps the greatest, living cosmologists, the great George Ellis. And he points to these new theories of the multiverse.
Yes.
Of course, the multiverse emerges naturally from the Copernican Principle once you see that this universe is far too designed. It's just really hard to explain all those fine-tunings you talked about at the beginning of our discussion here. It's really hard to explain those things. So how do you explain them from within a Copernican Principle worldview? Well, it's easy. There's an infinity of other universes, and this one just happened to turn out this way. Whoa, interesting. Ironic.
I go back to Frank Turek, who always asks, "Where did the machine come that keeps making these things?"
Well,
where did that come from?
Yeah. What's really funny here is if you look at it really, science comes into the world laughing at the theologians for allegedly arguing about how many angels can dance on the head of a pin. How ironic that now we see the scientists arguing endlessly about how many multiverses there might be that we can never even in principle ever subject to the scientific method because they can never be observed.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Rick Delano is previewing his new film called The Principle. You can find out more at theprinciplemovie.com. Also on Twitter, Principle Movie is at Twitter, and of course on Facebook, The Principle Movie. You can track all that down. We'll put our links on our coverage of this interview as well. And Rick, talk a little bit about your personal faith so people can, know you're being transparent, and how will the film, somewhat of non-Christian faith, that's not atheist, let's say a Buddhist or a Hindu or a Muslim, take this? Because their view on creator and designer is a little bit different than ours, but I hope that they can see that we're trying to extend our hands here. We're not trying to cut theirs off.
I made a very serious decision early on in this film not to make a religious movie. This is a scientific documentary. But because its subject is the Copernican Principle, which is a metaphysical principle, it's not a scientific datum, it's an assumption about reality. It happens to be that volatile point where science bumps up against philosophy, bumps up against metaphysics, bumps up against theology. It's that point where they all meet. And that's why it's so volatile and powerful. This question of our place in the cosmos has come back again and again. This is not a religious movie. This is a movie that examines the history of the Copernican Principle, how our worldview was turned upside down through the Copernican Revolution, and introduces people to these astonishing new observations, and then invites people to partake in a conversation about what these things might mean. I encourage people of faith to come because we need to re-engage the civilization intellectually. We have been far too timid for far too long. I encourage people of no faith to attend this film because it's going to challenge the things that they thought were so solid. St. Thomas Aquinas said that because we have the truth, we are morally obligated to understand the arguments of our opponents better than they do.
Amen.
And we are morally obligated to engage them on whatever grounds they feel most confident. And believe me, the Copernican Principle is the ground upon which the atheist feels most confident. And that's one of the reasons that the film is stirring up so much controversy.
Well, I tell you, folks, I have long blasted our school system, so you know how I feel about making sure your teenagers go to a film like this, because I almost guarantee if you go home right now and ask them, they won't know who Copernicus is. They were never taught that. It's easier to just keep them blind till they're in college and they'll be told what to think than it was to teach them along the way, have them Google up something that might not be what their professor wants them to know. So definitely a great talk with Rick Delano about The Principle. You want to go to theprinciplemovie.com, Twitter, Principle Movie, Facebook, The Principle Movie, and we'll have links to that as well. And it's great to talk to Rick and to know him a little bit and go through just a great, hey, brother, keep on the the breastplate and the helmet. It's going to be coming because, well, you opened in Chicago. That was pretty bold in and of itself. Chicago's not exactly.
We knocked it out of the park. They showed up. People loved the film. There's a lot of excitement. Thank you so much for having me on. And believe me, it is an honor and a privilege to suffer slings and arrows.
Yes.
For the faith. And I am happy to do it, and I am just honored. I'm not worthy, but I'm honored that, apparently God's even willing to use knuckleheads like me as a soldier at this point.
I feel the same way, my brother, and I will definitely keep in touch. We'll talk again.
Thank you so much for having me on. God bless.